Today we're doing angle and line relationships. Okay, we're going to talk about a bunch of different angle relationships. So you need to make sure you're paying attention, make sure you understand any of them. If you don't understand what we're talking about, make sure you say something. But any relationship we're talking about, they're either equal to each other, congruent, or they're equal to a number. Okay, vertical, the first one we talk about, they're congruent to each other, meaning they're equal to each other. Two angles are considered vertical if they're opposite angles formed by intersection of two lines. You have two lines crossing each other. The vertical angles are the opposite angles of each other. So if I was to say angle 3 would be vertical of what angle? 1. It's opposite of angle 1. So you have angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. They're vertical of each other. Even though it's straight across and technically horizontal, they're considered vertical angles because they're opposite of each other. All right. What would be the other vertical angles? 2 and 4. Angle 2 is equal or congruent to angle 4, okay, because they're opposite of each other. They're vertical. Okay. So if I know what one angle is, I know the rest. Okay, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to do several problems where they give you one angle and you got to find several others. Well, this is one of the relationships that lets you find that. Angle 1, if I say that was 50 degrees, what would be angle 3? 50. It's exactly the same. If I know what angle 2 is, let's say it's 20 degrees, then angle 4 has got to be 20 degrees. All right, write this down. Now, here's an angle relationship. It doesn't tell you anything about the angle measures. It's just something we talk about later about certain things, so you need to know what it is. And it's just two angles are adjacent. If I ever say adjacent angles, it just means that they touch. They share a common vertex, which would be here. And they share a common side, and they don't overlap. So they touch. Now, it doesn't tell you, adjacent angles don't tell you anything about what their angle measures are. It doesn't tell you the angle 5 is that, and you can figure angle 6. Right? Adjacent just means they touch. Right? But that's going to be important later on because we're going to use adjacent angles to find different relationships. So you need to know what adjacent means, and that's just that they touch and they don't overlap. All right, write this down. All right, two angles are complementary. These are two that we're going to talk about a lot that people kind of struggle with remembering which one's which, so make sure you pay attention. Two angles are complementary if their sum is 90. Means if they add up to 90, they're considered complementary. Now, they don't have to be adjacent. They don't have to touch. Right? That's something I want to point out. Right? But usually, complementary and supplementary angles are adjacent. Usually, they touch each other. But they don't have to. But if they add up to 90, we say they're complementary of each other. If two angles are supplementary, then their sums is 180. So here you can see right angle 90. Here, that's 180. It's a straight angle as what these two add up to. Right? So they're considered supplementary because they add up to 180. Now what I tell students is you can think of complementary C, which comes before S in the alphabet. Well, 90 comes before 180 on a number line. So you can remember it that. C with 90, S with 180. Or you remember that the S, supplementary, goes with the straight angle. Right? 180 is a straight angle. So S goes with the straight angle S. Okay? That's a couple different ways that you can help yourself memorize it. Okay? But either way, you need to memorize that. Complementary is 90, supplementary is 180. And you're going to use that to figure out what the other one is. If you know what this one is and you know that they add up to 180, you can find the other one. Just like a triangle. We know that three triangles, the angles of a triangle add up to 180. So we subtracted what we knew and found what we didn't know. You're going to do the same thing for complementary and supplementary angles. All right, you need to write this down. Okay, perpendicular lines. Where two lines intersect to form a right angle. You have two lines that intersect, right? And they cross and form a right angle, they're considered perpendicular lines. Which here, if they tell you they're perpendicular, here's what they'll write. They'll say L is perpendicular, and they'll draw an upside down T, and then they'll write the other line. So L is perpendicular to M, and that's how they write this right here. It's just an upside down T to represent a perpendicular angle. So if you see this, you know what they're talking about. They're saying L is perpendicular to M. All right, any questions? All right, write this down. Classify the relationship. So what they'll do is they'll show you two angles here like this, and they'll say, what's the relationship between these two angles? Right? And then if you know what that relationship is, you can find which one of them is if they tell you what the other one is. Well, can anyone raise their hand and tell me what they think X and Y, what the relationship between X and Y is? Tyler. Supplementary. They add up to 180. So these are supplementary angles. Good. If they're supplementary, then they add up to what? 180. So X plus Y gives me 180. I know what Y is because it says the measure of Y is 135 degrees. So X plus 135 equals 180. So I'm going to subtract the 135 both sides. So X must be 45 degrees. Sometimes they won't show the angles. They'll just tell you these are complementary. R and S are complementary. Sierra, what do complementary angles add up to?
90 degrees.
90 degrees. Right? So they tell you that R is 65.3. So you got to subtract 65.3 from 90. So angle S is equal to what?
24.7.
Excuse me, 24.7 degrees. Good. Well, I didn't mean to write 10 in the corner. That's supposed to be the degree symbol. There's your answer. 24.7. All right, complementary angles. They add up to what? 90. So 51, when we add to X, gives me 90. So I subtract 51 to both sides. X gives me 39 degrees.
31, Shannon?
All right, something else you need to know, because it's going to come into play when we're talking about different relationships, are parallel lines. And it's lines that are on the same plane that never intersect. These two lines will never cross. Railroads would be an example. They're two lines that never cross. Right? If they were crossed, then the train would fall off the tracks. Just like tires. Tires are parallel of each other. They will never cross. All right? So these are parallel lines and parallel lines that will never intersect. Now they have a way of telling you that they're parallel, and it's this. They'll say line S is parallel with line T. And it's just two parallel lines. So they will write this. That's why you need to write this down. Okay? Just like the perpendicular where it was an upside down T, here are just two parallel lines to show that S and T are parallel of each other. Okay? In case you can't tell. Alright, write this down. Alright, here's a diagram. It has two parallel lines. M and P are parallel. And it has what's called, this line right here, what's called a transversal. Transversal just cuts through two parallel lines. Right? Sometimes, and you'll actually see in a couple slides later, two transversals. Right? But a transversal cuts through a pair of parallel lines. Right? And it creates some relationships, which we're going to talk about those relationships here in a second on the next slide. But I want to discuss some things first, and that are the angles that are formed by a transversal. Interior. What's another word for interior? You guys know? Inside. Okay. If we talk about the interior of a house, interior of a car, okay, we're talking about the inside of it. Well, so the interior angles lie inside the parallel lines. So can anyone tell me one of the four interior angles that's formed here?
Angle 4.
Angle 4. That would be the first one. Angle 4 is an interior angle because it's inside the parallel lines. Here's your parallel lines. This would be the inside. Okay. Sierra, what would be another one?
Angle 3.
Angle 3. Isabel.
Angle 5.
Angle 5. And the left one would be angle 6. So 3, 4, 5, and 6 are what we call interior angles. They're on the inside of the parallel lines. Right? And that's going to be key for the next slide. You got to know this. Right? Exterior angles. Exterior, what's another word for exterior? Outside. Okay, exterior, if you're talking about the exterior of the house, if you're working on the exterior house, you're working on the siding or the roof. Okay, the outside, what people see. Okay, so the exterior are exterior lines that are outside parallel lines. So, Kendall, what would be an exterior angle here? 1. Cheyenne? 2. Ben? 7. And 8. Right? So angles 1, 2, 7, 8 are what we call exterior angles. They're on the outside. Right? So we look at the outside. Right? And this is going to be important for the next slide. Now you don't have to draw the diagram again, but you do need to write alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles. Alright, so alternate interior angles, this is one of the relationships we talked about. We've talked about a couple different relationships so far. Vertical, supplementary, complementary. Here are the 3 other angle relationships. And the first one's alternate interior angle. So what we do is we only look at the interior angles, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Right? And we look at alternate, which alternate just means the opposite, so opposite sides. Right? And the reason we have this relationship is that means they're equal to each other. So angle 3 is congruent to angle 5 because they're alternate interior angles. They're on opposite sides, they're both interior. They have the same angle measure. If angle 3 was 10 degrees, then angle 5 would be 10 degrees. The other alternate interior angles would be angle 4 and angle 6. They're congruent to each other. They're equal to each other. Right. And you can tell just by looking at the angle shape, right, it's the same. Alternate exterior angles. So just looking at my exterior angles, which are 1, 2, 7, 8, what would be alternate exterior angles? So let's say angle 1. What would be the alternate exterior angle of angle 1?
6.
7.
Oh yeah, 7. I forgot that's the name too.
Right. 7's an exterior angle, right? And it's on the opposite sides of 1. They're on the opposite sides of the transversal. So that would leave you with angle 2 and what angle? 8. Right? So if I know what angle 2 is, I know what angle 8 is. And corresponding, it means they're in the same position on the transversal, right? And they have the same angle measure, which the corresponding angles here are angle 1, which is equal to angle 5. As you can see, they have the same shape and they're on the same side, the same position of the transversal. Angle 2 is congruent with angle 6. Angle 3 is corresponding or congruent to angle 7. Angle 4 would be equal or congruent to what? 8. Angle 8. Those are corresponding. Those are your 4 pairs of corresponding angles. Angle 1 with 5, 2 with 6, 3 and 7, and 4 and 8. Right? And now it doesn't really mean that's what it always is. If they flip these numbers around, and then it's not necessarily the angles, it's the position of the angles. Right? 1 is always with 5 because of the angle position. Now the thing about this is you can use these 3 relationships plus supplementary and vertical to find every one of these. If I knew what angle 1 was, I could tell you which every one of these angles are. Right? And most of them can be found just on these 3 relationships. I can find 1 with, if I know what 1 is, I know what 5 is. Right? Which if I know what 1 is, I know what 3 is because they're vertical. Vertical angles are equal. Right? If I know what 3 is, I know what 7 is. I also know what 5 is because of their relationships, alternate interior and corresponding. If I know what 3 is, I know what 4 is because they're supplementary angles. They add up to 180. So if I know what 4 is, I know what 8 is. If I know what 4 is, I know what 6 is. So just based off one angle, I can find the rest based off my relationships. Okay, so here is a pair of parallel lines right here, and they have 2 transversals. Transversal just cuts through a pair of parallel lines. It has 2 of them. And then mostly what your homework will be shapes like this. And it'll say classify 2 of the angles. Here it wants to classify 3 and 5. For something like this, you have 5 options. We've gone through about 6 different options that are going to tell you what they could be, like measured wise. But there's really just 5 that we're going to use for this. And it's vertical angles, supplementary angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles, the ones we talked about yesterday. So, of angles 3 and 5, what would be the relationship between 3 and 5?
Would interior be
They are interior angles, but of the 5 that I just went through, right?
complementary?
No, they're not complementary.
Wait. That would be
These are alternate interior angles. They're both on the inside. They are interior angles. Are they on opposite sides? Yes, so they're alternate interior angles. Now we're going to use those 5 relationships to find the measures of angle 5 and angle 3. Let's find the measure of angle 3 first. If angle 1 is 120 degrees, what does angle 3 have to be? You said it's 120. Why do you say it's 120?
Because they are
What's the relationship of the 5 relationships we talked about? Right? Which one describes 1 and 3?
alternate interior.
They are vertical angles. Right? You can see that in the picture when we talked about vertical angles. They're on opposite sides, right? And they're equal to each other. So, measure of angle 3 has to be 120 because of the vertical angle relationship. So how can I find the measure of angle 5? What relationship would tell me between 1 and 5 would tell me what 5 is?
exterior. No. That's interior. I know that.
They are corresponding angles. 1 and 5 are corresponding. If 1 is 120 degrees, what's 5 got to be?
120.
120 degrees as well. All right. What's another relationship I could use to find 5? The other relationship would be between 3 and 5, the alternate interior angles. Right? So I know that 5 is 120 degrees. Right? Based off one angle, I can find them all, guys. If you use those 5 relationships, supplementary, vertical, alternate interior, alternate exterior, and corresponding, right? If you know what they are, you know what each of them is talking about, you can find all 8 of these angles here. Right? How can I angle, what about angle 2? Does anyone know what angle 2 would be? Or at least how I would find angle 2? Two is supplementary to angle 1. What does supplementary add up to? 180. So how can I find angle 2?
180
Right, subtract 180
from
and 120 from 180. What is 180 minus 120? 60. So I know what 2 is. Do I know what 4 is? How do I know what 4 is? Vertical angles. So if 2 is 60, 4's got to be 60. Do I know what 6 is? 6 has got to be 60 because of a couple different relationships. One, we could say alternate exterior angles or corresponding angles between 2 and 6. Right? I know what 5 is. 5's 120, so what's 7 got to be? 120. It's vertical of 5, so that's got to be under. What's 8 got to be? 60. So if you know one angle, you know 8 angle. Okay, you already have this diagram. You just need to write classify angles 9 and 13. And if the measure of angle 13 is 75 degrees, find the measure of 11 and 15. So I need to classify angle 13 and 9. What would be a relationship between 9 and 13?
Corresponding.
They are corresponding angles. Good. Again, you've got 5 options. For all of these angles, you've got 5 options. Right? Between 9 and 13, they're corresponding because they're on the same spot of the transversal and the parallel lines. Right? They're equal to each other. Now, let's say if I know measure of 13 is 75 degrees, I need to find measure of 11. Right? I don't have a rule that directly tells me what 13 and 11 are. Right? But I do have a rule that tells me what 9 is, and I have a rule that tells me what 12 is. Let's go with 12. What relationship tells me what 12 is?
That would be
Alternate interior.
Alternate interior angles. Good. Right? If I know what 12 is, can I find 11? What relationship would tell me what 11 is if I knew what 12 was? They are supplementary angles. They add up to 180. Always look for a straight line. If the straight line's their backbone, right, then they've got to be supplementary, right? So if 11 plus 12 gives me 180, and I know that 12 is 75 degrees, how do I find 11?
subtract 75 from 180.
Okay, so subtract 75 from 180. So angle 11 is equal to
105.
105. 105 degrees. Right? What's another way for me of finding 11? If I knew what 13 was, if 13 was the only one they gave me, how could I find 11?
Find out what 10 was.
No, you don't.
No.
Could I find out what 9 is?
Yes.
Based off corresponding angles, right? So if angle 13 is 75 degrees, what's 9 going to be?
75.
And guess what 9 and 11 form?
It was
Supplementary angles. They have a backbone of a straight line. So 9 and 11 are supplementary angles, right? So I could take 75 from 180 and get 105. So that's how I could find 11. What about angle 15? Sierra, how could I find angle 15? If all I knew was angle 13. Right? Vertical. These are vertical angles. So Brittany, if 13 is 75 degrees, what's 15 got to be? 75 degrees. Right? So based off one angle, I can find every one of these angles. Okay? And that's all it's going to ask you to do. Alright, you need to draw this. Alright, here it tells you that the measure of ABD is 164. So ABD, this whole thing, adds up to 164. I need to find the measures of ABC and CBD. Well, I know that ABC plus CBD add up to what? 164. I know they add up to 164. Then I replace them with what they say those angles are. What do they say angle ABC is?
one. They say it is
2x plus
2x plus 23. Sarah, what's CBD? What do they say it is? Angle CBD, what's the measure there? If ABC is 2x plus 23, what's CBD? X. Good. That equals 164. So now, first thing I do is I can combine like terms. If I see two variables that are exactly the same, right? Something that has exactly the same variable, x and x, I add the numbers in front. So Cheyenne, what's 2x plus x? Huh? No. If you add numbers in front, 2x plus x. Good. 3x plus 23 gives you 164. And I'm going to move this up. Right? How do I find out what x is? Jaden, you have any ideas?
Both sides.
Yes, good. I want to subtract 23 both sides. That gives me 3x is equal to 141.
Then you divide 141.
Good. I divide both sides by 141. Or by 3, right?
Yeah.
To get x by itself. So 141 divided by 3 is 47. So there's my answer. I'm going to plug this in up here. X is equal to 47. So I know what CBD is, but do I know what ABC is? I don't right at the moment. How could I find ABC, William? So good. I take 2 times 47 because I know what X is. X is 47, so I take 2 times 47 and I add 23 to it. 2 times 47 is
94. Yeah, 94.
94. What's 94 minus 23? Or plus 23?
That would be 117.
117. Okay. Is there another way that I can find my answer?
Yep.
What is that, Camden?
Subtract 47 from 164.
Okay, I could subtract 47 from 164 because I know they both add up to 164. So I subtract what I do know, 47, right, and I get 117. Now this is more of a I want you to check your answer with. I don't really want you to find your answer. I want you to use 2x plus 23 to find your answer. But this is a way that I could check my answer, right? Any questions? All right, write this down. All right, angles RST and UVW are vertical angles with RST equal to 3x and UVW equal to 5x minus 36. I need to find the value of x and then I need to find the measure of UVW. Why does it tell me the vertical angles? What does that try to tell me?
That they're all equal.
Okay, so that RST is equal to UVW. That's what the vertical angle tells me. So all I have to do is replace RST with 3x and replace UVW with 5x minus 36. And I can now find x. Now I want to get x on the same side. So I'm going to move the easier one, right, which is just subtract both sides by 5x. Because I've got x already by itself on one side. So I'm going to move this one over here. What is 3x minus 5x? Negative 2x equals negative 36. I divide both sides by negative 2. X must be
13.
36 divided by 2 is 18. Right? 18. So I know the value of x. It's 18. How do I find UVW? I take 18 and plug it in right there for x. So I do 5 times 18, subtract 36. What's 5 times 18? It is 90. 90 minus 36 is 54. So UVW is 54 degrees. So there's your two answers. Is there any way I can check my answer? Okay, I know that RST should be 54 because UVW is 54. How could I find what RST is?
You can multiply 18 by 3.
Okay, I replace 18 or x with 18. What's 3 times 18? 54. All right, here's your homework assignment for today.